She opened her eyes to a bright light, making her groan. She placed her palm on her eyes and laid on her stomach. A sudden thought crossed her mind. She jolted and sat straight, looking at the unfamiliar room with wide eyes. She was sitting in an extravagant bed with soft and fluffy pillows. That was something like out of a fairy tale, with sparkling chandeliers hanging from the ceiling. "This room is bigger than mine," she said with a giggle while clapping her hands. Mine touched the mattress of the bed. "This is so soft," she said and rolled over it while giggling, and stood and began jumping, not knowing a pair of almond orbs were deadly staring at her. As she turned around, her giggles died down. She stopped jumping and stared at him with doe eyes. "What is your name?" she asked, twinkling her eyes innocently. "Him," he said coldly while glaring at her. Her gaze shifted to his toned chest, which was peeking through his unbuttoned shirt. Her face flushed red, but then a playful smile appeared on her face. She jumped out of the bed and walked to him. She reached out her hand to his chest and trailed her fingers from his chest to his abs. "What the hell are you doing?" he muttered through gritted teeth and held her hand in a harsh grip. She yelped in pain. "You are hurting me," she mumbled as tears glistened in her eyes. He released her hand with a jerk. "Rude bastard." She slapped his chest and passed her a death stare. "Don't act as if we were old pals or something. Stay away from me," he said furiously and buttoned up his shirt. Mine rolled her eyes and sat on the bed. "Get off the bed." He held her by the arm, making her stand. "Why? For your kind information, you are kidnapped, so don't act like you are the owner." He squeezed her arm. "It hurts." As she said, tears began flowing down her eyes. He let out a sigh, loosening his grip. "You can't even bear this pain." He clenched his jaw. She wiped her tears and sniffed. "I'm not crying because of the pain. I'm crying because I have been kidnapped." She wiped her nose with her palm and began crying out loud. "How will Dad know I'm kidnapped?" she cried, sitting on the floor. "Shut up. You are here just because of that bastard dad of yours." He growled, making her flinch and crouched down to her. "You are a bastard. Don't you dare to call my dad like that." She furiously grabbed him by the collar. He grabbed her jaw. "No one dares to reach my collar." His dark tone made mine shiver. She released his collar and looked away. "Will you kill me?" she asked, wiping her nose. "Stop doing that." He released her jaw and stood. "I won't kill you. I just want to see your dad in pain." "Why do you want to see my dad in pain?" She stood and sat, staring right into his eyes. "I won't hide anything from you. Your dad had slapped me and humiliated me just because I was a merry clerk in his office. But now I have made my own emperor. I'll make him taste his own medicine," he said with a smirk. "You must have done something," she said, glaring at him. He raised his brows. "Don't force me to treat you harshly. Keep your mouth shut until you're here," he warned her in a cold tone and made his way to the door when her voice stopped him. "I'm starving. Bring me something, and I also want some clothes," she said, scrunching her nose. "Well, it's lunchtime, so you'll get it soon. And about your clothes," she cut him off. "About clothes, I'll wear yours. I'm fine with it." She grinned. Thane's eyes landed on the dimple on her right cheek. "You're not allowed to wander around, so stay here," he said, and glanced at his wristwatch while Wine was staring at his features with tender gaze. "Damn it, I'm late for meeting," he mumbled and walked out while Wine's trance broke. "Hot, charming, and damn handsome," she said with a grin and walked to the washroom. At night, the whole day Wine had been eating and wandering around the house. She got along with the maids as if they were old pals. With her arrival, the house had lit up with joy. Maids were also happy with her. The whole day, the house echoed with her giggles. After the maids finished work and went back, Wine had dinner and laid on the bed. Soon she went into deep slumber. Now it was past 11 p.m. and Thane reached home. He had dinner with his clients. He went to his bedroom when his gaze landed on Wine, who was lying on the bed on her stomach, her head buried in pillows while she was half covered in a duvet, while the other half was hanging from the bed. He shook his head in disbelief and stepped forward. He had almost forgotten her. Thane threw his coat on the sofa and removed the pillows, straightening her, and removed the duvet. He stopped for a while, seeing her in his hoodie and trousers. The hoodie was lifted, revealing her stomach, while the trouser was stuck in her calf. He pulled down the hem of the hoodie and trouser. "I can't leave my bed for you." He lifted her and laid her on the sofa, Wine slightly in sleep, then covered her with a duvet and made his way to the washroom when he heard a loud thump. He frowned and looked over his shoulder where Wine was lying on the floor. A slight smile appeared on his face. He shook his head and entered the washroom. Next morning, ___ woke up to the soft rays of sunlight streaming through the curtains. He rubbed his eyes and switched to the right side when his eyes met Wine, who was resting her hand under her chin and staring at him with affection. "What are you doing here? Why are you staring like that?" He sat straight and asked. "Let me tell you a secret," she said in a state of trance. "I like you." Then narrowed his eyes at her and ran his fingers through his hair when he stopped feeling something. He quickly picked up his phone and turned on the front camera. He had 3 piggy pony on his hair. "What the hell, you did this?" he asked furiously while glaring at her. Wine stood with a smile and nodded. "You threw me on the floor, that's why I took a small revenge on you. Believe me, you look so cute and hot at the same time." Then let out a sigh and stand before her, staring at her with dark eyes. "Stop bothering me. It's not been 24 hours and you have troubled me so much. I'm not your friend with whom you can pull stupid pranks. I had kidnapped you, remember?" "I don't feel I'm kidnapped in this luxury room," she said, looking around the room with sparkling eyes. "As if you don't live a luxury life," he said and walked to the washroom. After a few minutes, he freshened up and came out. Wine was lying on the bed, trying to unlock his phone. "What are you doing?" he said, snatching away his phone. Wine straightened and stood staring at him. She felt her heart hammering against her chest. ___ kept his phone on the charger and picked up his tie, but Wine took it from him and draped it around his collar. "Don't you want to go home?" Wine looked at him. "Will you leave me if I want to go?" He shook his head in denial. "I won't leave you until I torment your dad enough. I will kill you if something happens to Dad. He loves me beyond everything." She gave his tie a gentle tug and glared at him. Then chuckled, "As if I'm scared of your stupid threat." They didn't notice the closeness between them. "At least I can live in peace for a few days without caring about my stupid studies." She rolled her eyes while ___ shook his head in disbelief, noticing the joy in her tone. Wine released his tie. "It's been more than 5 minutes, why didn't you tie it?" he asked confusingly. "I don't know how to tie it." She shrugged her shoulders. ___ had an urge to smile at her silliness, but he controlled it, keeping a straight face, and began wearing his tie. Wine wrapped her arms around his neck. "What are you doing? Move away." Wine trailed down her hand to his chest. "You're blushing," she said with a smile, only to earn a glare from him. Then stared at her dimple until it disappeared. "I really like you." He stared at her coldly. "You're rude, but at least you don't call me fat or ugly like those mean people around me." She said the last part is low and sad tone. "Neither you're fat nor you're ugly, chubby." Wine placed her hand on his cheek. "I really like you. Can we be together?" she said, staring at him with hopeful eyes. He grabbed her jaw harshly while his expression turned as hard as stone. "Do you even know what I'm saying? Do we have a match? You're just my enemy's daughter for me. You can't mean anything else to me." She smiled slightly. Then felt a mix of confusion and intrigue. "You also think I'm fat and ugly." She blinked away her tears. "I didn't mean it in that way. Dear Dad, can you please comb my hair? Usually Dad does it for me. It's okay if you don't want to," she said innocently with a bright smile. Then stared at her in surprise how easily she hid her emotions behind the smile. "I can do it." Wine nodded and quickly sat before the dressing table. ___ was combing her hair while she was talking and giggling. All this while she didn't stop speaking for a second while ___ was hearing her attentively as if nothing was important than it. Time skip. It's been a few days since Wine is here. The whole day Wine seemed to be out of the world. She was scared of her feelings for him. Today the maids noticed her energy was lower than usual, so they decided not to bother her and left after completing their work. Wine had dinner and washed the dishes. She thought to make a cup of coffee and opened the cabinet. The bottles of wine caught her attention and her eyes lit. She quickly took out 4 to 5 bottles and opened it. She poured it into a glass and took a sip of it. A fiery sensation engulfed her throat, leaving a burning trail. She kept away the glass and picked the bottle. After a few minutes, she was sitting on the floor, blabbing drunkenly while the empty bottles of wine were scattered around her. 𝐿𝐲 reached home and made his way to his bedroom when Wine's voice grabbed his attention. Usually she would be asleep until 𝐿𝐲 returns. He followed her voice, which was coming from kitchen. He frowned, seeing her holding the spatula in air while stumbling. "Nobody messes with my cooking skills," she said in a drunk tone to an imaginary figure throwing the spatula in air. "What the hell is going on here?" The bottles of wine caught his attention. "You pancake thief!" She took stumbling steps towards him. He stepped forward and held her. She threw the spatula and opened her eyes wide. "You're drunk," he said with disbelief, Wine frowned, touching his cheek with her index finger. "Who are you?" Suddenly her eyes widened as if she realized something. "Kim?" "Yes, Kim." Wine didn't let him complete. "Kim Jong-un," she said with a sheepish smile. "Stop talking nonsense, I'm Kim Tham," he said and lifted her in his arms. "I'm flying, Kim Jong-un, I'm coming," she yelled. Tham had an urge to throw her on the floor, but he restrained himself and made his way to the bedroom. "From where the hell did Kim Jong-un come?" he said with a stern expression. "From door." He entered the bedroom and made her sit on the bed. He was about to turn away when she held his hand and began crying. "What happened?" he asked confusingly. "Kim Jong-un, don't leave. We both have to lose weight together or else they'll make fun of our double chin," she said, holding her double chin. "Yours is even bigger than mine," she cried, wiping her nose with the back of her hand. Tham suppressed his smile on her last sentence. "Do you really like Kim Jong-un so much?" She shook her head in denial. "I can't lose weight because food is my priority, so I want him to lose weight." She laid on the bed and stopped crying. Tham sat beside her. "What does his weight have to do with you?" As he said, she began crying out loud once again. "They all call me Kim Jong-un because I'm fat. If he loses weight, then they won't call me that anymore." Tears were rolling down her eyes. He leaned and wiped them. "You know that Kim Tham is also a bastard." She closed her eyes while sobbing. "Don't cry over someone who doesn't value you," he said in a state of trance, catching her cheek. She opened her eyes and placed her hand on his face. "Tham," he nodded. She smiled widely. Spontaneously, Tham leaned towards her dimple and pressed a soft kiss. Wine tangled her fingers in his hair. Tham's trance broke and he swiftly pulled away. He was about to stand, but Wine pulled him back and hovered over him. "I like you so damn much," she whispered and captured his lips, taking him off guard. Tham's eyes widened while his heartbeat raced. He wrapped his arms around her waist and pulled her, deepening the kiss, but her head rolled to one side. He realized she was asleep. Tham let out a sigh and closed his eyes. Next morning, Wine woke up groaning due to a sharp headache. She placed her hand on something hard and propped up, only to gasp as she was lying over Tham's sleeping figure. Her legs were locked with his, while she had rolled the duvet over herself. She reached out her hand and traced her fingers over the creases on his forehead. "Why do you even frown while sleeping?" she mumbled, oblivious to the fact that Tham was awake. She rested her chin on his chest and stared at him with a wistful gaze, her eyes conveying a mixture of longing, yearning, and a hint of sadness. She stared at him for a good 20 minutes until he spoke. "Aren't you tired of staring at me?" His voice filled with annoyance. Wine looked at him with surprise and smiled. Subconsciously, she unbuttoned the top 3 buttons of his shirt. "No, I can stare at you for the rest of my life," she whispered, staring right into his eyes while trailing her fingertips over his chest. "What the hell are you doing?" he muttered, holding her hand. "Taking advantage of your ignorance." She winked at him only to earn a glare from him. "My goodness, you're blushing," she laughed while Tham felt himself drowning. He was staring at her without blinking. "What the hell is going on with me?" he thought, throwing his head back. "Get off me before I throw you on the floor," he said in his usual cold tone. Wine moved away, noticing his stern tone. "Cold bastard," she mumbled. Tham sat straight, running his fingers through his hair. "By the way, why did you keep me in your room?" She leaned towards him. "What if you fall in love with me?" she whispered with an innocent look. Tham stared at her for a while and grabbed her by the hair. "I can never fall in love with you. As for keeping you in my room, you might run away if I got my eyes off you." His grip was gentle. He released her and stood, Fair enough. Well, when will you let me go? I feel bored here. Not until your father's company goes bankrupt, he said with a smirk. You bastard, I will file a case against you when I go from here. She grabbed his hair in both fists and pulled them. He hissed in pain while swiftly released them. I didn't mean to pull hard. Does it still hurt? She asked, worriedly rubbing her hand over his hair. Don't even think to mess with me. I won't hesitate to make your life hell as well. He warned her and moved away his hand. She muttered something inaudibly and rolled her eyes. Tim picked out his clothes and made his way to the washroom, but stopped remembering something and turned towards her. You are not allowed to ever drink again, at least not in my absence. As if you can stop me. Once I go from here, you won't be present around me. She waved her hand in the air, plopping on the bed and blushed, reminding of what she had done last night, while Tim stood lost in thought about how would the house feel in her absence. Go and tell Amanda to make hangover soup for you, he said absent-mindedly and walked to the washroom. person who never really cared for his mother was caring for Wine as if she was a little kid. Despite his cold nature, he showered Wine with so much love and affection. It was like a love storm. Ham found himself completely addicted to Wine's playful and childish behavior. Her carefree spirit and infectious laughter brought out a side of him that he didn't even know existed. Their bond grew stronger by the minute as they spent more time together, sharing deep conversation, laughter, and unforgettable moments. Today, Tham was home and woke up past 12:30 p.m. Tham was attending an online conference conference meeting, so she walked out without disturbing him. Now Wine was feeling uneasy. She came to Than's room to check if he had finished his meeting. Usually she would barge into the room, but right now she was lost in a deep thought and opened the door. As she was about to enter, Than's words stopped her. He was holding the phone to his ear. Mr. Han, your daughter is head over heels for me. I can do anything to her. She's completely smitten, he said with a smile. If it was some other time, she would have loved his smile, but right now it felt venomous to her. It's like his smile had turned into a poisonous expression that made her feel betrayed and hurt. Mr. Han said something from the other side, to which he chuckled slightly. I never wanted to drag Wine into this, but you forced me. Only if you hadn't slapped me in front of the whole office, I wouldn't have done this to her. He said the last part through gritted teeth. Wine's heart sank while her eyes widened in shock. She stared at his back in disbelief. She felt a sharp pain arising in her chest, making it hard for her to breathe. Sam turned around but froze, seeing the disbelief in her eyes. Wine, he whispered, declining the call. He stepped forward, but she shook her head in denial. Her eyes welled up in tears, her hands trembled, and her heart felt like being ripped apart. You fooled me, she said in a barely audible voice. She felt her world came crashing around her. No, Wine, listen to me. He walked to her and held her by the shoulders. She yanked away his hand as if nothing was more disgusting than his touch. You didn't love me, that was all a part of your revenge. She wanted to cry her heart out and yell at him, but the tears just wouldn't come. It felt like a numbness had taken over, leaving her feeling empty and unable to express her emotions. I will always remain the childish fool. It's all my fault. You never said you loved me. I just assumed it because of your few affectionate words. She let out a hollow chuckle. No, you are getting it wrong. I love you. He held her face. She jerked his hands and pushed him. Don't come near me. You want to fool me again, but bad for you, because I won't be fooled again. I don't want to see your face ever again in my life. Tam stared at her with the pained expressions. I want to go home, she whispered to no one in particular and turned around to leave, but Tam held her by the arm. Where are you going? I want to go to Dad. She stared at him blankly. Please let me go. She didn't seem to be in the right state of mind. He nodded. Come, I'll drop you. No, driver. Ask the driver to drop me off, not you. He let out a sigh and ran his fingers through his hair. Fine. Time skip. It's been a few days since Wine is back home. She cried hysterically in her dad's comforting embrace. She couldn't shake off the pain of what she believed was his cruel revenge. Every morning she wakes up with a heavy heart, feeling a void where Thane used to be. Nights are the hardest for her. Alone in her room, she would replay memories over and over again while tears would stream down her face. Her appetite dwindled and she found it hard to find joy in the things she used to enjoy. Her dad tries his best to convince her to go to the university, but she doesn't want to. Thane is no different than her. Without her by his side, everything feels dull and lifeless. The once vibrant colors of the world turn into grey shade. He tried to distract himself, immersing himself in work, but nothing could help him. Now Wine was standing in front of the dressing mirror when Mr. Han called out her name. Wine, she was blankly staring at the invincible point. Mr. Han's heart clenched, seeing her state. Wine, this time he shook her by shoulder. She startled and looked at him. You called me Dad, she said absent-mindedly. Mr. Han took off his glasses and rubbed his eyes. Dad, are you crying? She turned towards him and held his face. Look at your condition, Wine. You are no more my beloved daughter, who would laugh and smile the whole day. He held her shoulders. You have lost so much weight. Only if I wasn't so arrogant and hadn't slept with him. Her heart missed a beat hearing his name. No, Dad, I'm fine. I just want to lose weight, she said with a cold smile and empty eyes. You think you can lie to me? She hugged him and cried silently. Why does it hurt so much, Dad? I want to forget him, but my heart still longs for him. Mr. Han closed his eyes in agony and stroked her back. He let her cry until her phone rang, grabbing their attention. She pulled out, wiping her face, and picked her phone. It's Matthew, she said, declining the call. I have already said you, Wine. You don't have to force yourself on Matthew. I can manage everything. She wiped her nose with the back of her hand. No, Dad, Dad, if marrying Matthew saves your company, then I'm willing to do it for you. Besides, Matthew is a nice guy. This way I'll be able to move on. I already denied his right, but you agreed. I don't want to save my company using you as a tool. I have enough savings for you, so you should refuse to Matthew. You're not marrying him. He said in a serious tone. She held his hands. I'm doing it with all my heart, Dad. Trust me. He released his hands. Stop fooling yourself, fine. You know whom your heart wants. You still need to get over everything. Stop forcing yourself. Dad, please don't stop me if you care about my happiness. She tugged onto his sleeve and said, twinkling her eyes innocently. Fine, just one last chance, he said and kissed her forehead. Thank you, Dad, she said, squeezing his cheeks with a smile. Mr. Hand chuckled. Oh yeah, Dad, I forgot to inform you Matthew wants to introduce me to his friends. Tonight he has arranged a party in the club. Can I go? Mr. Hand smiled at her innocence. Yes, you can, but you're not allowed to drink. She nodded. What party? The club was packed with people dancing and having a great time. The loud, energetic music filling the air with a contagious beat. The colorful lights flashed, creating a vibrant atmosphere. Wine was following Matthew nervously. Hey, you okay? His voice filled with concern. He held her hand gently. Yes, I'm just a little nervous, I guess, she said with a reassuring smile. It's okay, I'm here. He said and led her to his group of friends. There were 5 male and 3 females. Wine greeted them while girls had an unpleasant look on their face. Matthew Sarah was better than her. Isn't she overweight? Wine held the hem of her shirt. Mind your language, Daisy, he said sternly. That's the fact. She looked at others. Right, guys? They all agreed. Wine had an urge to run away from here. Everything was deaf to her until she heard Daisy's cheerful voice. Hey, 𝐿𝐴𝐥𝐻 is here. Wine felt her heart hammering against her chest. She looked up where he was coming with a cold face while Daisy strode to him and held his arm with a smile. Wine felt her heart drop to her feet while at the same time she wanted to peel off Daisy's skin, but Hem yanked away Daisy's hand and passed her a death stare. Wine felt relief wash over her. Hem met with others feeling someone's gaze on him. He turned around when his eyes met Wine. He felt a mix of emotions. Matthew held her hand and came towards him. Them, this is Hen Wine, my fiancé, he said with a smile while Them felt as if someone had snatched away his breath. He was constantly staring at her with intense gaze. Wine, this is Kim Them, my business partner. Wine just nodded, staring at him blankly. Matthew frowned. Do you know each other? Not at all, she said, looking at Matthew with a smile. Them had an urge to wipe off that smile from her face. He restrained himself and turned to the guys who approached him, but his attention was on Wine and Matthew. Wine, I like you the way you are. She looked at him confusingly. Don't get me wrong about this, but I think you should lose weight. She passed him a glare. I mean, I don't want my friends to make fun of you or look down on you. He held her hand, but Wine released it. She grabbed him by collar. Really, if you liked me the way I am, then you wouldn't have told me this. You can leave me, I don't care. She released his collar and wiped the imaginary dust from his shoulders. Wine, he held her arm. Don't even think to touch me. I won't hesitate to make a scene here. She warned him and walked towards the bar. Them wanted to go behind her, but his phone grabbed his attention. He attended the call and walked as it was an important call. After a few minutes, he came searching for Wine. His eyes caught her around Matthew and his friends. She was holding the bottle of alcohol while stumbling on her feet. He strode to her. Matthew was about to hold her, but Them was faster. Wine, what are you doing? He asked, trying to take the bottle from her. Believe me, I will beat the shit out of this duckling, Daisy, she said in a drunken tone while wiggling in his grip. Wine, look at me, he cupped her face. Them, my Them. She held his face, kissing his cheek, and pecked his lips, taking everyone by surprise. But he is not mine anymore. She began crying and placed her head on his chest. Matthew is also a jerk. He can't even protect or defend me, coward. What is going on? Then held her closer to his chest. She's my girlfriend, don't come near her again, he said and scooped her in his arms and walked out, leaving everyone confused. Time skip. Wine fell asleep on the way to Them's mansion. Them took her to his bedroom and laid her on the bed. He sat beside her, stroking her hair and staring at her as if quenching his thirst. She opened her eyes. Why do you look like him, bastard Them? She touched his nose with her index finger. Then let out a chuckle and kissed her eyes. Kim busted him. He whispered, "Do you love me?" She swiftly shook her head in denial. "I love that jerk him." "Indeed he is a jerk." She slapped him on the face lightly. "Don't you dare to call him that. Only I have the right to call him that." He leaned closer, but she stopped him. "Stay away. If you love him so much, then why are you with Matthew?" "Because he doesn't love me, and because of him my dad's company went bankrupt. I want to save it by marrying Matthew." Tears rolled down her eyes. They wiped them, but they kept on coming. "I'm sorry, but now I had decided. I'll marry Kim Jong-un," she said with a smile. Tang shook his head. "I'm coming, Kim Jong-un," she yelled, making him almost go deaf. This girl's obsession with Kim Jong-un. He moved back and covered her with a duet while she was still dabbling. Next morning, Wine held her aching head and opened her eyes slightly, only to meet with the ceiling. She groaned inaudibly and raised her hand, switching to the other side, but her palm came in contact with something soft, and a slap sound resonated, making her snap open her eyes. Her eyes widened, seeing Tang holding his cheek. "What am I doing here?" She sat straight, looking around. Tang also sat, rubbing his cheek, something that couples do. They had quite a good night together. He whispered into her ear and moved back, looking at her. Wine's eyes were about to drop out of the sockets. "You're lying." Tang chuckled, running his fingers in his hair. "I'm not," he said with an innocent face. Wine grabbed his collar while tears welled up in her eyes. "You took my advantage." Her voice broke. He encircled his arm around her and pulled her closer. "These tears shouldn't come out. I was just kidding." His tone changed in the blink of an eye. "How could you trust so easily? Just by our condition one can understand." She wiggled in his grip. "Because I am the fool that's I mistook you and trusted you easily," she said in a stern tone and released herself from his grip. "I swear I truly love you. That was not part of my revenge. I said those things to your dad just to torment him for a few more days. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to hurt you." He reached out his hand, but she moved away. "For a moment I will believe you, but look at your love for me, so worthless. You used it as a tool for your revenge. Your ego and revenge are so important to you. You prioritize them," she said and got off the bed, making her way to the door. Tang stood in her way. "I didn't hear my entire life. Just give me a chance, Wine. I'll make it up to you." "Those words were just to scare your dad. I didn't mean it." He cupped her face while Wine lowered her head. "Will you give me a chance?" She remained silent. "If you can't stand me, I swear I will never show up." He pressed a long kiss on her forehead and moved away. Wine looked at him, his eyes glistened with tears. "You single-handedly drove my dad's company into bankruptcy." Tears rolled down her eyes. He shook his head in denial. "I didn't do that, I promise." He wiped her tears. "Did your dad tell you that it was me?" She shook her head in denial. "I assumed." She wiped her nose with the back of her hand. Tang let out his eyes, staring at her. "But you said on the call about dragging me into this and all." "That was about the kidnapping part. Ask your dad if you don't believe me." She just nodded. "Are you willing to stay with me or Matthew?" His heart raced, thinking, what if she chooses Matthew over him? Matthew doesn't like me. If he liked me the way I was, then he wouldn't tell me to lose weight, she said, scrunching her nose. "You're also a liar, so I'll marry Kim Jong-un. My house feels so empty without you. Can't I get a chance?" he asked with hopeful eyes. He didn't seem to be the him she met the very first day. One let out a sigh and stepped forward. "I can't deny my feelings for you." She placed her head on his chest, but he interrupted her. "I will bring you a dress. I will kneel if you want me to," he said, holding her finger. "That's enough. I'm not that cruel." She placed her chin on his chest and lifted her head. "I will give you a chance." Tang smiled while the door knocked, grabbing their attention. Tang opened the door where a lady in her late 40s was standing, whom Wine assumed to be Mrs. Kim. "Mom," Tang, Amanda said, "you brought Wine home late at night." She stopped seeing Wine. "Is she?" Tang nodded and let her in. "You're so beautiful, more than her Tang described." She held Wine's hand and said with a smile. Wine looked at Tang, who shrugged his shoulders and walked to the washroom, leaving them. "Wine, I'm sorry for what that junk has done. He has never been in a relationship. He never experienced all this. I have never seen him so vulnerable after his father's death. He was so devastated when he called me when I was abroad. Please don't leave him. You have brightened my son's life." "Don't apologize, ma'am. We have settled everything. I won't leave him," she said with a smile. They both sat and talked about random stuff until Tang walked out of the washroom. "Didn't you get along really fast?" He threw the towel on the bed. Mrs. Kim stood with a smile. "No, Don't be jealous, I will just tell Amanda to prepare breakfast for you. She walked out. Theo, Dad would be worried. I want to go home. He came towards her. Don't worry, I informed him last night. He cursed me for a while and hung up the call saying to take care of you. I see, well, Mom said you are planning our wedding in 2 months. She said, playing with his wet hair. God, she can't keep secrets. Can we marry after a year? She asked hesitantly. Theo smiled. As you wish, until then I will put you over. He kissed her forehead while nodded, wrapping her arms around his neck. By the way, you're obsessed with Kim Jong-un. Till a few minutes ago you wanted to marry him. He felt her smile over his neck and closed his eyes, feeling her warmth. When I saw you for the first time, I didn't realize my heart would go so crazy for you. He said, tightening his grip, and kissed her crown. Wine lifted her head and stared at him. Wouldn't you say something? Today I just want to listen to you. She said in a state of dream and caressed his cheek with her thumb.